Okay, so let's do the Elysium Award analysis. And again, what I do in this series is that I analyze every milestone or every award on a map on the basis of 9 characteristics that I made up. And hopefully that'll help you figure out things like when to claim them, which ones are riskier, what flips them, etc. So first, let's go over the awards in Elysium. And they're quite interesting. The first one is Celebrity. It's whoever has more cards of cost 20 or more. The second, Industrialist. Quite similar to Miner, except it replaces the titanium with energy. The kicker being that energy only matters when you produce after the game ends. Then Desert Settler. That's going to be the tiles in the last 4 rows of the Elysium map. And if you see the Elysium map, the bottom 4 rows are pretty bad. That's why it's a desert. So yeah, it's generally not where plants go, not where greeneries and cities go. If you look the 5th row, the middle, the equator. It's great. It has 5 ocean adjacencies and a bunch of plants. So you could get some adjacencies there, but other than that, you're usually only replacing in places less than ideal. Then State Dealer is, to me, the most insane award of them all. It's whoever has more tiles next to oceans. And basically what happens is whenever I see someone claim this award, the game just changes immediately into chaos, fighting for those final tiles next to the oceans and fighting to place oceans. It's the most chaotic award that there is, which is not one of the characteristics. And finally, Benefactor, just more terraforming rating. That's one of the more predictable ones. So let's get started. So let's go over what each characteristic is. So first of all, claim is what's the earliest you can usually claim this award. So I basically describe it as early, mid, or late, with early being really mid-game, late being usually last generation, and mid somewhere in between. Flippability, how easy it is to flip the award after it's claimed, which is very important. Flipping an award can be worth 10 points in a 2-player game. It can be worth 6 points in a 3 or more player game. Deviation. It can actually be worth 8. Deviation. That's how far you have to deviate from playing well to flip the award or to take it. So ideally this is slow. It just goes into your strategy. Indicators is just saying what things should you be looking for early in the game to tell who is going to be competing on that award. And of course, always one of the things is the thing itself, like number of 20 cost cards, but many times that's not the main one. Safe range, so there's early and late. This is basically what advantage do you have to have in the award to feel comfortable claiming it, early and in the last generation. And then finally, what are the corporations that are better for each award? What are the key projects that can flip the award or can help you take the award, and what strategies each award aligns with. So let's begin with claim. Okay, so first of all, Celebrity. I think the Celebrity is early. It's quite possible that someone has the money advantage, the titanium advantage, and it just more cards so far, and they just know at that point, right? It can, like, every award can be contested, because at any point in any game 2 players can be doing sort of something similar. So it's possible that every award is late, but this is sort of the best case scenario. There's definitely a scenario where Celebrity goes early. Industrialist, on the other hand, is something you don't want to risk, and we'll get into a few of the cards that flip it, but it's a very volatile award, easy to flip. I only claim late. Desert Settler is sort of mid, just because in this map there's usually no one placing tiles in those bottom 4, especially the bottom 3 rows early, so you usually don't see a lot of them. Like, you might get some plant prod, but because the tiles on that bottom part of the board come in late, it's hard to claim it earlier than that. Then State Dealer, again, need, same thing. It's because it's rare for a lot of oceans to come down early, and even rarer for the spots around the oceans to be taken before the oceans, right? So for the most part, this is a like last few generations award. It's not as late as the Industrialist, which could be a last generation award, but it's definitely something that you don't want to go early. And Benefactor, again, can definitely go early. There's many scenarios in which, someone is going for terraforming and the other person just isn't. Is going for points. So yeah, Benefactor is one that you can read pretty early. It's one of the easiest one to read. So let's get into Flippability. Now, again, Flippability is very important in a two-player game. Every award you flip is worth 10 points. And there's basically the most expensive card is 43 and 46 when you take in what it costs, and that would be worth it. If that card flipped on a word, it would be worth it. So even two cards, like probably two cards for 10 points are good enough to flip on a word. So it's always worth to try and flip it regardless of what other point cards you're not playing. In a three-player game, it's a little less. Usually the flip is from second to first, and then you're gaining 6 points on one player, 3 points on the rest of the players. But yeah, there's a scenario where it's worth 8, where you come all the way from third to first. So yeah, but it's still always worth it. So let's get into Flippability. Now, Celebrity is very low. Why? Not only can you only get one step per card, because you can only play a card that's worth 20 at a time, but they're also very expensive. So you're not usually gonna see someone like chain 2 or 3 very expensive cards. You will see some point cards, and this is the thing that expensive cards are more common at the end of the game, especially in the last generation. So you will see some point cards come down late, but it's usually gonna be like 2 or 3, and you're probably gonna have 2 or 3 on your own. So yeah, one of the hardest awards to flip if taken properly. On the opposite side of that is Industrialist, which is very high. And despite energy not being energy like turning into heat every generation and only the last generation mattering, I feel like this is actually more flippable than a Miner because some of the cards out there. But of course, I mean, this is a pretty crazy award because steel is something that you're gonna wanna use sometimes. I mean, not so much late, but you're gonna wanna use it in the last generation to pay any steel cards that you can save cash on. So players sort of go up and down on this, unlike Celebrity, which is every generation that passes you'll have the same or more 20 cost cards. With Industrialist, you're gonna have less and more steel, even in the last generation. So easy to flip, lots of cards that help flip it. Very dangerous. Desert Settler. I think this one's low. Now, not as low as Celebrity. There is one card that probably can place more than one tile, but also there's a bunch of standard projects, which is not the case with Celebrity, right? So you have to watch out for the standard projects, cities and greeneries, obviously, because they, if someone has money, then you have to wonder. You may have to wait a little more. But usually, if you have a decent advantage on this and you place your cities properly to block the good spaces on the bottom of the desert, you'll be fine. And many times you might be the only player on the ground too. So yeah, State Dealer. It's medium, so there aren't that many spaces around the oceans, but it can be flipped by both tiles and oceans are probably the more important one. And I feel like oceans, sometimes a lot of them get placed early, but you usually see a couple in the last generation, right? And where those are placed is really important. Like I said, this is very chaotic. It's maybe not as flippable, because if there's only one player on the ground, it's hard to get back on it. But you can do a lot with standard projects, so more flippable than Desert Settler for sure, but not as flippable as Industrialist. And finally, Benefactor is low. There are a few cards that give a lot of TR, and that's all you have to worry about. We'll get into those. They tend to be very expensive, but again, not as low, but they're pretty rare. So, and usually it's easier to predict when they are coming. So there's markers for each one of these cards for the most part. Right, so let's get into Deviation. Celebrity. So this Deviation for Celebrity is medium, just because if you go for a flip, it's gonna take, usually at least 40, but probably more. So the thing is that I don't set it as high, because those are usually going to be point cards, and there are a lot of good expensive cards for the end of the game. But if you play just one more than you needed, then it's going to be a lot of cash, and it's going to be cash on nothing. Unlike something like a standard project, where even a city is going to get you at least 1 or 2 points, or a greenery. If you play an expensive card like Beam from a Thorium Asteroid at the end of the game, which is really worth a point, maybe a little more if you have Jovian multipliers, you're definitely playing a high premium to flip it. I put it at medium because there's a chance you're actually playing a few good cards. Industrialist is high. So here's the thing. There are a lot of cheap cards that flip it, but usually none of them do you any good except flipping it, right? So yeah, I'm gonna set it a little higher than Celebrity, but basically anything you do is a waste of money except for the award. But the good side is that they're cheap, so that's why I didn't go very high. Desert Settler is slow because, well, you do want to place tiles at the end of the game. The tiles that you place are usually gonna give you points. There's a few more cheaper ones that won't and can help you steal it, but for the most part, you're gonna flip this with cities and greeneries, which are nice to play at the end of the game. Maybe you play a couple of inefficient ones, but that's it. State Dealer. Okay, again, this is a crazy award, so it just looks like I put everything on medium because I can't tell. But yeah, you might have to pay for an ocean, that's an project ocean, to try to take it, or maybe a tile. Then again, those oceans and those tiles usually give you points, and they're not bad to play, so that's why it's medium. But again, this is just a pretty crazy award. And Benefactor, very low. Basically, getting TR at the end of game is getting points, so it's not as efficient as getting victory points. TR tends to be a bit more expensive, but if you play a big TR card at the end of the game, that's usually a good play. So yeah, it fits right into any strategy. There's basically no bad plays that risk flipping Benefactor, right? Okay, let's go for the indicators. So for Celebrity, well, the main thing is the 20 cost cards, but also look at Titanium Prod, because a lot of expensive cards cost Titanium, and Titanium is worth 3 cash, and then Money Prod. And then also look at Jovian tags, because if the player is high on Jovian tags, they probably have Jovian multipliers, and all the Jovian multipliers cost 20 or more. So yeah, that could mean that they have a bunch of cards to play in the last generation. So that's it's the least important one, but also watch for it. Industrialist. So the main thing here is Steel Prod. Science, Energy Prod, is not gonna accumulate throughout the game, so you just care about what you produce in the last generation. However, we'll get into the cards that flip it. Science tax and energy tax matter much more than energy prod. So yeah, watch out for that. Desert Settler. So the main thing is plant production, and the second thing you want to watch is desert tiles. So this is what I mean by it's not always the thing on the award, the main indicator. I would rather have all the plant production and none of the tiles than all of the tiles and none of the plant production on the desert, right? So you see a player with 3 tiles, but you have 6 plant production, you are getting that award. So yeah, first plant production, the second is desert tiles. State Dealer. The main thing is plant production, but once again, this is an extremely crazy award, and I would say don't even look at the advantage, like who has 1 or 2, because that's the thing, there's gonna be like 1 or 2 adjacencies early, maybe even 3 or 4, but then as soon as it's claimed, everyone just like goes nuts on this award, and just starts claiming tiles all around it. And yeah, even turn order might be more important, but plant prod definitely helps. Of course, ocean cards in your hand is one of the main things, but you you can see your hand, but you can see other players. So actually, if you have ocean cards in your hand, that may be the biggest tell, but you only can see yours. And finally, for Benefactor, so the main thing is hit prod and plant prod, and then terraforming rating. Obviously, if the terraforming rating is advantage is something like 20, then yeah. But again, I would rather be the player that has 6 plant prod and it's 5 TR behind than the one that's 5 TR ahead and no plant prod, right? And that's because same with hit prod. And actually, hit prod might be more important because there are more steps. I mean, these two are pretty close. The thing is that hit prod can also you can also take steps with asteroids a lot more on the hit track, so they're pretty close. But again, the biggest tell for Benefactor is hit prod and plant prod. Okay, let's get into the ranges. So for Celebrity, what's the safe range early? So I would say if you are 4 cards ahead, so 4 cards played of 20 or more ahead of the next closest opponent, and you're either tied or in the lead for titanium plus money, you are pretty safe to take this early. Again, watch out for the Jovians. This is a big tell. They're not going to have all 4 multipliers, but they could easily have 2. So that's 2 cards at the end of the game that you probably suspect they're going to play, so watch out for them. Cards to a lesser extent matter, but I don't consider it as much. 'Cause, yeah. Industrialist. So if you are 5 steel prod ahead, then I think you can take this early. Notice that for minor, I had this at 3 steel prod. Because remember, steel is the thing that's gonna you're gonna have a lot of leftover steel at the end of the game if you have something like 5 steel prod ahead of your opponent, right? So titanium and energy prod basically doesn't matter. I mean, unless they're on like 20 energy prod, but that's rare. The reason I went with 5 and not 3 is, again, like I said, Industrialist is more flippable than Miner, and we'll get into the cards that do that later on. For Desert Settler, again, this award is going to be very similar on all characteristics to Landlord. Because they're basically the same, they just require you to deviate a little more into placing tiles in the bottom of the board. But if you have 6 advantage combined of plant prod and desert tiles, I would take this early. State Dealer. I'm gonna say 6 plant prod plus adjacencies in total. So if you add up your advantage in plant production and adjacencies to oceans, I think you can take it. But again, very chaotic, crazy award. Lots of fun. Anything can happen. I would be careful with it. And finally, Benefactor. I would say if you are 10 TR ahead and you have a tied or in the lead for plant and heat production combined, then you can take this early. Otherwise, it could be a little risky. Now, when I say early, I usually mean like mid-game or right after, and even though some have like a late claim, there are scenarios where you can figure it out. But yeah, that's where I would be. It's just basically that 5 steel prod in the mid-game is very unlikely, so that's how these two columns basically relate to each other. So let's go for the save range in the last generation. So for Celebrity, I think if you're 2 cards ahead, you're pretty safe to take this. Once again, watch the Jovians, watch the point cards. But if you're 2 cards ahead, you can probably take it. It's unlikely that they'll play 3 cards at the end of the game that are 20 or more cost, just because they won't have the money for it. If your opponent has a crazy income, then you might increase it to 3, but 2 is unlikely, and at that point you're only risking a draw, for which your opponent would have to play really expensive cards. So yeah, I think 2 is safe in the last generation. For Industrialist, so after you factor in everything you're going to use, or everything your opponent's going to use, and all the production that's going to happen after the game ends, then if you're 5 resources ahead, I would claim this. It's still a risky award. There are lots of cards that flip it, but sometimes you have to risk it for points. So, yeah. Desert Settler. I think if you're 2 tiles ahead, you're safe. This is the same as... of course, this is, again, after you factor in all of the money that could be put into standard projects, all of the planned production after the game ends, and you calculate that you're 2 tiles ahead of your opponent. After that, then you're safe. He could have cheap tiles in his hand, like mining rights or something, so that's the reason I go for 2, but it's rare. Like, people don't usually keep those tiles. Most of the cheap tiles are good early, so unless they keep it in a master plan to steal this from you, then, good for them if they did that. Otherwise, 2 tiles should be fine. State dealer is going to be defined in the last generation, or you don't claim it until it is, right? So this is, again, a weird award that's very chaotic, but because people rush for the first and second place after it's claimed, there's not gonna be anything to wonder in the next generation. It's either you're gonna be sure that you got it and you take it, or you already know who's gonna get it, or no one's gonna take it. So yeah, that's how that goes. And benefactor, I would say 3TR. Now, there are a few cards that flip it, but I think you can risk it at 3TR, and you're probably just risking a draw. Alright, let's get into corporations, and this one's long, but these are basically in order the corporations that I believe have an advantage on each award. So first off, for Celebrity, Credit Corp. Obviously, it's aligned with that strategy. It loves cards that cost 20 or more, and it's going to try to play them, and it's going to have a bunch of them, so Credit Corp. Then Teractor. So most of the corps that like the 20 is usually the rich, flexible corps that have a lot of cash. I put Teractor second, just because there's a lot of Earth techs at the end of the game that have that, that are point cards. So like Interstellar Convoy Ship, Large Convoy, Nitrogen Shipment. Those are all very good point cards that people play at the end of the game, and Teractor gets a discount on them. And there's also other things like, Earth Catapult early, but that's the main reason. Then third, Polyphemus. So Polyphemus, that's what they have to go for. Polyphemus can't afford to buy a lot of cards because they cost so much. So the good strategy with Polyphemus is to play less cards that are very expensive. And of course, if they do, then they have that huge starting cash, plus that income, plus the titanium, so they're pretty good for that. Then Saturn Systems, just because a lot of Jovians cost more than 20, so people tend not to play them, and they're really good for you to play, so you're playing cards that cost 20 or more, and you're getting an extra income for it, so Saturn System very good with it. Then Point Luna, the only corporation that seems poor at the start, but they're one of the best in-game game corps. They start with titanium, they want to go to space, they draw a lot of cards, and they're awesome. So yeah, Point Luna is the only poor one here, but they're great for it. Then Pristar, again, Pristar, because they don't want to terraform, they have to go for points. And they have a big benefit to building their economy early. They're going to have a lot of cash. So yeah, Pristar. And then, so Lakefront, again, just because they have a lot of money. Same thing with Mons, they're the rich corps. Finally, Fobula, they're going to go for titanium. That's usually going to be like a Jovian strategy or a space point strategy, so yeah. But really not a big advantage for Fobula there. Next up, Industrialist. So much like Mining Guild is king here. Almost impossible to lose this award if you're Mining Guild. But then things change a little. Utopia Invest, they have the ability to just change production for 4, which means they can get 7 extra, basically, in the last 2 generations, which is really good for them. So with them, you always have to be on the look. Then Thorgate. So Thorgate wasn't in the miner, obviously, because they have energy, but Thorgate's going to be always high on energy. And not only that, but they can get, they can use that standard project ability to just steal the award for like a lot. Like I said, like 5 resources is the safe range. Fobula can get that for 40, which would be a lot, but like if it's Fobula, like it might be worth it. 40 for 5 points, just to tie. 48 to flip it. Yeah, be careful. Then Factorum. So Factorum is more complicated. The first thing is that they're gonna draw a lot of building tags. And building tags, they tend to have a lot, well, nearly all the steel production is in building tags, and most of the energy production is in building tags. So it's not really that first ability, because that only works if you have no energy, and there are a few things like high-tech lab that can combo to give you a lot of energy with it. But the more that you're drawing steel tags, that's gonna end up being a lot of energy and a lot of steel one way or another. Then Robinson Industries are good for any resource like that. Manutech, remember, playing production cards at the end gets them extra resources, so that's why they're a little more dangerous. And finally, Shenxing, just because, again, they're gonna play a lot of building tags. They can't find them the way Factorum does, so they're not as good, but they have a discount, so they're probably gonna be around on this award. Okay, Desert Settler. And Desert Settler is basically identical to Landlord. Ground game wins this award, so Ecoline first, because plant production is really going to be the main thing, and Ecoline is the best plant production corporation. Then Tharsis, because they place a lot of cities, and they keep other players for placing cities early, not so much late. Achaean Communities and Philaris are both really annoying in the ground game. They tend to push other players away from the ground. Then Mining Guild might be a little weaker on Elysium than it is on Tharsis, because the mine spots are weaker, but they're also a lot of them in the desert. So Mining Guild is more likely to have tiles in the desert. They just, if they don't get the ground game going, if they don't get the plant prod, which can happen, they won't get there. Then Credit Corp, because they have that really good bonus on standard projects, so they get cheaper greeneries and cities. Lakefront Resorts, a little less. There are very few tiles that are adjacent to ocean. I think it's actually, yeah, there's only 2 tiles adjacent to oceans for Lakefront, but it's still a very rich corporation that can do it, and they're gonna be underground. And finally, Recyclone, because they play building tags and they have a way to get plant prod much worse than Ecolines, but they have a way. Okay, State Dealer, the crazy award. So State Dealer is a ground game award, but what matters really is what matters more is the oceans, right? So the way to flip it, the best one to take it is Lakefront Resorts. And yeah, the reason is very simple. They have advantage on placing the oceans. They're gonna put the oceans where they want next to their tiles, and then they're gonna get a bigger bonus from their tiles. So this is the only corporation that's gonna have a lot of adjacencies. Well, no, a bunch of them will, but it's the best corporation to have adjacencies early next to oceans, and they might have a few more. But then actually the 2 corporations that are next, Achaean Communities, is because they can kick you out. Basically, they can reserve a spot and place the ocean later. So they're actually really good for this. Not as much for Desert Settler, because you're never gonna be able to take all the possible spots in the desert. But you could take all the spots, all the remaining spots next to oceans, and then you don't even have to worry about rushing the tile. You just have your marker there. All the oceans are placed. So Arcane Community is really good for this award, better than I would say corporations that tend to have a bigger ground game like Ecoline. And then Philaris. So Philaris is just really annoying to play next to, and this award, if your Philaris claim this award, even if you lose it, okay, maybe that's not true, but if this award gets claimed in your Philaris, you're very happy. Players just start playing tiles next to each other like crazy, and that's gonna be really good for you. So Philaris is great for this award. And then Ecoline and Tharsis, I would say in that order. Ecoline is still more likely to place more tiles. Tharsis can probably shoulder you more out of the space, but yeah, I think Ecoline has a small edge, but really it's Arcane Communities and Philaris the ones that are better on the ground game, even though they tend to be a bit weaker on the ground game. But yeah, it's their ability to just be annoying to play next to. And finally, Benefactor. So UNMI is king here. It's really hard to have more terraforming rating than UNMI. Despite them being weak, just they'll get 9 or 10 more by default, right? they'll suffer in other ways, but 9 or 10 more by default. Helion, and again, it's the heat prod corp. If you go for pure heat and you get some heat prod in your hand when you start the game, yeah, you'll probably be in the lead for this. There are more heat steps than plant steps, so that's why Ecoline is behind it, but Ecoline is probably the best corporation to get plant steps with. Then Inventrix, so Inventrix, it's just because they can play a few cards earlier, usually means they can do a few more steps than most corporations at Terraform, but they're not great. There's just not that many Terraform corporations in the expansions or the promos. But finally, MSI. MSI is probably gonna Terraform Venus. Like they have to use their bonus, right? So they have usually in most games 15 steps to themselves, which they usually get like 7 of those steps. They get to 14, and at that point they can play anything. Well, actually they'll get to 16, which is where you get a terraforming rating. But that's 8 steps plus a free terraforming rating that they usually get. That's 9 terraforming rating. So yeah, MSI is actually good for this, even though they don't terraform on Mars. They do terraform on Venus. If they get a little heat going, they're usually pretty good for this. So key projects. For Celebrity, none. There are no cards that you can play that give you 2 steps on this award, right? I'll say it again, be wary of Jovians. But yeah, there's just no cards really here that you have to watch out for. So let's move on. Industrialist. Okay, so this is what I talked about. Most of the cards that flip minor were about steel. Most of the most dangerous cards are about energy. So the first one is energy saving. This is probably the most dangerous one because it has no requirements, and it's usually going to get you, like, it's the one that has the higher upside. Maybe in a 2-player game it wouldn't be first, but 3-4 player game, there's maybe 7-8 cities. Yeah, energy saving, very dangerous. Then power grid. Now, aside from Phobolog, most players don't play a lot of power tags, but still, no requirements, and it can get you like 4, 5, or 6. Very dangerous. Mineral deposits, again, no requirements. It gets you 5 steps. This was the first one in minor. And then hired raiders gets you 4. But then after hired raiders, I think mass converter, corona extractor, and quantum extractor are probably more dangerous. They get you more steps, but they do have high requirements. If your opponent has no science tag, you don't need to watch out for this. They're all 4 or 5 tags. And then finally, sabotage. Now it gets you 4 steps, just like high raiders, but only if your opponent has 4 steel in the bank. And you have to wait for them to get it, right? So if they're producing it in last generation, for example, you can't do it. So that's why I have this lower. Whereas hired raiders only requires 2 steel, and you'll get a difference of 4. Sabotage requires 4, which is slightly harder to get it that way. Finally, mining rights. Mining rights placed on a 2 steel spot will get you 3. Now that's under what I call safe, but it's so cheap that you can play 2, so I would say watch out for it. I didn't include mining area or industrial center, just because it's really unlikely that there are cities adjacent to those 3 steel spots on the bottom of the board. Like, it's very rare, so they actually don't have the same effect in Elysium than they do in Tharsis. So I don't consider them as important as I do in the other map. Right, Desert Settler. Again, same thing as Landlord. It's only greenhouses. It's probably one of the few cards that can get you 2 tiles. And it's not because it's going to get you 16 plants, but it can get you 9 or 10, and maybe that's, you had 6 or 7 plants, so that's basically 2 greenies that you weren't counting on, right? So I think it's the most important card to watch out for. It's the only one that can place more tiles than you expect, and it's also really cheap and can be paid with steals, which means at the end of the game it's really cheap or free if they're floating steel. So yeah, I think that's the most dangerous card for Desert Settler. Now State Dealer, like I said, it's more about the ocean than it is about the ground game. And so the most dangerous card here, it only places one ocean, but it places it where you don't expect it, and that's Artificial Lake. So sometimes you'll surround the oceans with your tiles and you just go happily away thinking, okay, wherever he places the ocean, he's gonna place it next to one of my tiles. He can't place tiles next to it, so I got this. I don't even need to worry about placing that last ocean. And then they play Artificial Lake next to 3 of their tiles that are completely away, and they flip it horribly, and everything ends. Yes. So this is the most important project for this award. Then Ice Asteroid and Lake Maninaris, they both place 2 oceans. Ice Asteroid, it's more expensive, but it's also can be played with paid with titanium and tends to have more discounts. And you don't have to wait until the heat hits 0, so that's why I have it ahead. Then Ice Moon Colony. This card, if you're replacing the game, usually places 2 oceans. Because the colony bonus in Europa is an ocean, so watch out for this one. It's a rare case, but it does happen, and people do forget about it. And finally, Giant Ice Asteroid. It's 2 oceans, and it's way more expensive. It has the upside of maybe killing 6 plants that the other player needed to place next to the ocean, but that's rarely the case. It's also a card that usually goes very. They're not gonna wait until the last second to place it because you want to get all 4 steps. So that's why it's a little lower. Okay, and finally Benefactor. So Benefactor again also has like one big card that matters, and that's Terraforming Ganymede. This is the only card that it's like a multiplier that gets you Terraforming rating. So this can get you as many Terraforming rating as there are Jovians in game, plus 1 for its own tag. Seeing it go for 6 or 7 is not weird. Seeing it go for 4 or 5 is usually the lowest. And here I'm trying to go for cards that give you 4 or more, because that's sort of above the safe range in the last generation. There are a bunch of cards that can get you 3 Terraforming rating, but I'm not putting them here. There are a few exceptions though. So Terraforming Ganymede, the card that can get you more Terraforming rating, really key, and it's also like often the player that has Jovians may not be the one that terraform more, so it's a pretty painful steal when it happens. Then Magnetic Field Generators. So this is the best map for this card. This card is pretty useless, but it has one use case, and it's that you have extra energy production, and then extra steel, so you just play this for free, get 3 Terraforming rating, and maybe with that 2 plant production you get an extra greenery. And in that case, it's great, one of the best end-game cards in the game, and it can be free. So this is why it's ahead of a bunch of other ones. The fact that it pays with steel means that it can be free, feel free, because you pay with steel that you weren't going to use, or much cheaper. And then it gets you 3 TR and maybe a greenery, maybe gets you to 4. So yeah. Then Magnetic Shield just gives you 4 TR straight up. The reason I have this lower is because that 3 energy tag requirement is not as trivial. But this is pretty cheap for 4 TR, and if it's flipping Benefactor or even tying it, it's totally worth it. On its own, it's usually worth it. Then Giant Ice Asteroid. This is 4 steps. Probably 5 if you get 6 plants. Like this probably kills a greenery. Now it might be an endgame greenery, but still, it's 4, maybe 5. And same thing with Demos Down. Now Demos Down kills a greenery for sure. Now that might be an endgame greenery that doesn't give Terraforming rating, but it does have the potential to take 4 Terraforming steps. NRA, it gives you 3 steps, and the plant production can give you a greenery. Now that's 4 plant production usually, so it's a little lower than Demos. It's not necessarily going to give you an extra greenery, but it is 3 plus maybe 1 more. And then the last 3, now none of them give you 3, but they are pretty cheap cards that you usually don't expect at the end of the game, and they give you 2. The first one is Bribe Committee. Playing this in combination with other cards can be good for flipping Benefactor. Then Ratcam Factory, same thing. If you have the energy production, is super cheap, and it also costs steel. And then Vote of No Confidence, one that people tend to forget, but these will get you a terraforming rating at the end of the game if you take the chairman. Now, it's always from a neutral delegate, which is why it's really rare to see it at the end of the game, but it can happen, with some crazy events or something like that. So yeah, it can happen, it can get you to, and it would be pretty cheap, but otherwise it's really rare that it happens. Finally, the alignment. So Celebrity goes well with the Science and MC strategy. Obviously, you draw more cards, you have more cash to play them. Industrialist and Engine are also going for a lot of energy to do like oxygen bumpers and heat production. That last energy you produce is going to matter. Obviously, going for steel is always good. Desert Settler, ground game, either a rush ground game. It's a little worse here because again there are only 2 adjacencies next to an ocean. So if you're like ocean walking, you're not gonna be placing on the desert, but you are gonna have the plant production to, at the end of the game, move into the desert. If you go for cities, then lots of space in the bottom area of the map, so that's a little better. State Dealer is great, on the other hand, with an ocean walking strategy. And so basically this is the best strategy to take this and to secure it early. Other than that, there's not like cities. A ground city game would be there, but not as much as it's not even close to what an ocean walking strategy is. And Benefactor, and like again, ocean walking, that's gonna give you a lot of TR, but a heat energy game would also get you a lot of TR. But anyway, that's it for my video on the Elysium Award analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and see you next time.